Here's one from Steve Jackson. I understand you used to shoot film. Do you think you might do so again? As I, for one, would appreciate a video of you doing so. Possibly. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a huge desire to shoot film anymore. 4x5 I loved using. I loved the process, but shooting film, personally, I can't see the point. Here's a good question from Paul Kirk. Are you traveling with Gavin? And if so, do you have enough toys, chocolate, Game Boy, etc. to keep him entertained? Well, I don't know. Gavin was supposed to come on this trip, but he hasn't shown up yet. So yeah, I don't know. He's not terribly reliable. He's probably out shopping for chocolate and I don't know. Here's another good question from Al Evans. Thanks, Al. What's the best piece of advice you were given when you started in photography? Oh, that's a tough one. Because I really wasn't given any kind of advice. I did go to community college and took photography, but it was more business related than, than actually making images. I think there's a couple of pieces of advice that I could give you that I've learned from myself, I guess. Well, that's not totally true. I think the best piece of advice that I've learned is to always shoot for the light. Light is what will really make or break a photograph, I think anyway, especially with landscape photography, street photography as well, portraiture, definitely. So the best piece of advice is to photograph the light, look for the light. Another piece of advice that I would give people, and this doesn't work for everybody because we all have different personalities, would be to slow down, especially with landscape photography, nature photography. Slow down and try to learn as much as you can about your subject matter, whether that be taking lots of walks to the area or just spending time looking at your subject and trying to learn as much as you can about it. I find that, well, it's difficult because when the light gets really good, your first instinct is to just rush out there and take as many shots as you can, and hopefully you'll get one good one. But if you slow down and just try to concentrate on one aspect, it might be, say some beautiful light hitting the side of a tree or something like that, then just concentrate on that and just stick with it. So yes, definitely light and slow down. But I guess, if you have a type A personality, then it's hard to slow down. So you have to kind of figure out what works for you. Here's a question from Alan Price. Well, Adam, I got myself a Nikon D800 and can't seem to get the clarity of your shots. Bloody AA filter is my excuse. What's your advice? Well, first of all, I hardly ever use filters. I don't leave a filter on my any lenses. I only use filters when I have to use filters. So I'll physically put a filter on, use that filter, and then take it off again. If you have good glass, then there's no reason to use filters for protecting the front of the lens unless you're poking sticks into the front of it. Having said that, using a tripod, if you can, really helps a lot. And also light, again, concentrating on what the light is doing is going to give you the clarity and depth that you want. If it's just flat lighting, then you're just going to get a flat photograph. So concentrate on the light. As far as sharpness goes, if you're hand holding, then keep an eye on your shutter speed, because if the shutter speed is too slow, then even with vibration reduction or whatever your camera uses, no amount of holding steady is going to keep that image sharp. I don't know, without looking at your photographs, I can't really answer your question, but if you do have filters on, I would just take them off. Okay, here's one from Lenny. What to you constitutes a great image, and do you have a process you go through when deciding on a composition? By the way, bring a raincoat to the UK, always raining here. Well, actually, it's been sunny every day since I got here, and we're in Scotland as well. I must have brought the good weather with us. And actually, I came to the UK last year, and it was just bright blue skies the whole time in the Lake District. So, what constitutes as a great image? That's a tough one because it changes every time. It really depends on what moves you at that time. It's like looking at a piece of art. Some art moves me and other pieces kind of like, I just don't get it. It could be the light, it could be a composition, it could be the subject matter. So there's no real set recipe for what really makes a great image for me anyway. It's usually the light and the composition, has a feeling, a mood, it moves me inside. That's usually what makes a great image for me. Sometimes you might get a clever composition on an image that you might not have thought of yourself. Stuff like that. What's the process I go through with deciding on composition? It's usually to do with flow, how the objects or the subject flows through the image, how your eye is brought into the image, and trying to maintain that attention to the central part of the image. That's what's important to me. I try to set things up in such a way that, say you have a branch of a tree, it comes in and then it stays in the frame and might curl around again, or it might be the light. The light is acting a certain way that's interesting. It's really hard to say. Actually, it's a tough question because it's something that you do intuitively. It's not something that I really think a lot about. And it's kind of the same when I'm doing my videos. Really, when I'm talking about a composition, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but it doesn't come naturally. You're just kind of thinking about what you're doing, but you're not really thinking, well, why am I doing it this way? It just looks good to your eye at the moment. That's the way I work anyway. So thanks for the question, but that's a tough one. If it was an easy one to answer, then everybody would be doing the same thing. Here's one from Gareth, which is kind of along the same lines. What's your favorite thing about compositions when looking for them? For example, do you have a common theme you look for, or is there a particular thing your eye is drawn to? Well, I think I kind of answered that in the last question. It's more about the flow and how things move through the frame in a pleasing way, generally, to draw you to perhaps a main subject. It's hard to say. I mean, I like complex scenes rather than simple ones. Mind you, simple ones generally do better if I'm selling them as prints. But complex scenes are really great as well because they keep you going back and looking and discovering more details in the frame. But they're harder to compose because there's so many elements that you have to go through. They're kind of like stepping stones. You might have an element or a subject that you start here and then work your way over to here and there and so on. So visual flow and stepping stones into the scene. That's kind of what I look for. Here's one from Top Notch Photography. How did you grow your YouTube channel? I don't think it's growing in leaps and bounds. It's been a very slow process. I mean, I'm happy that I've got so many subscribers now, 20,000. It's great. I know that Nigel Danson started at the same time as me, and I think he's 130,000, which is just phenomenal. I think if you want to grow your channel, just be true to yourself. Just keep putting out videos on a consistent basis. I think that's the key. And try to put something out a little bit different than what everybody else is doing. Don't worry about the numbers. Just put videos together that you enjoy putting together. If you don't enjoy it, then you're not going to last very long. If you try to fake it, try to be something that you're not, like high energy, or it won't work if that's not your natural character, I believe anyway. And just try to do something a little bit different. There's a lot of video channels that are very similar. Like the gear ones are very, very similar. There's an awful lot of those. I'm more about the light and composition and going to little areas and showing people those areas. So that's what I stick with because I feel more comfortable doing those. The gear reviews and that, I've done a couple, but I'm not terribly good at it because I'm not, even though I have a lot of gear, I don't look into all the little minutiae of all of the gear that I have. I mean, even my Nikon D850, I don't know how to use all the menus on there because most of them are irrelevant for what I do. So yeah, just be true to yourself and you'll grow. This question got a great response on our podcast. Is it the photographer that makes the image or is it the scene that is presented? This is from Darren J. Spoonley. Ooh, tough one. I think it's the photographer. A lot of the scenes that I go for tend to be a little bit more complex and not so popular. I think a lot of photographers go for the more popular locations or the more iconic because they're a little bit easier to photograph. They've been done before, you've seen photographs of them before, so it's just a matter of waiting for light. And if you get good light and you copy someone else's composition, then you're going to come away with a good image. So in that case, it's more about the scene. But I like to think that it's more about the photographer. If you're more well-rounded and you come away or go to areas that aren't so popular, like Mull here. I mean, all of the areas that we've been to, I've never seen any photographs of them. Then they're a little bit more subdued, not so much in your face. But I really enjoy that type of photography. I really enjoy going to new areas and just, discovering little vignettes for yourself. So I think it's more about the photographer. I mean, obviously, if I went to an area like Delicate Arch or Mesa Arch, then I would probably end up with pretty much the same images as everybody else. So in that case, it's probably more about the scene, I think. I hope that answers your question. I know some people will probably disagree with me. Here's one from Paul Downey. How long have you lived in BC for? What was your job before you were a photographer? Well, I think I answered that one before. I was actually a rock climbing instructor. I did that for about 10 years and then I got into photography and I've been attacked by Canada geese. Started up photography in '92, so quite a long time. Here's one from Greg Schneider. Did you recently place a patch over your jacket logo? Couldn't help but notice. Yes, I did, and now if I can find a piece of blue tape, I'll probably put one over this too. It really annoys me when clothing manufacturers put their logos on their clothing because I pay good money for this shirt and I don't really want to have their logo on it. They should be actually paying me or give you a cheaper deal when you have their logo on it and you pay a premium when you don't have their logo on it. I don't see why I should have to pay to advertise somebody else's product. It might be different perhaps if they were sponsoring me or something, but like Arc'teryx, I mean, I like their clothing, but their logo's fine, but and it's not just Arc'teryx, it's all the companies, North Face, you name it. Everybody has their logoed shirts and stuff, and some of them just have it blatantly put over, and you're paying huge amounts of money to advertise their products. I don't get it. But anyway, here's one from Arthur Kuhn. I'd ask about the business side of being a landscape photographer. Do you make the most of print sales or well, Arthur, I don't actually make a living yet from landscape photography, and you're probably thinking, well, how do you make a living? Well, actually, I don't. I'm pretty much living off savings from the past, and it's running dry slowly. I used to make a good living out of photography when I was working for magazines, but as most of you know, magazines have pretty much gone to the age of the dinosaur. Photography has changed an awful lot over the years, and not in a good way. So I make my money off various little aspects of photography. You can't just concentrate on one thing, not very easily anyway. I do know that some people do make a living off of prints, but I make my living off various aspects of photography. And the more I do this YouTube channel, the more I make off this, ad revenues, affiliate links, print sales, selling images or the rights to images in products, but all of them pay very little, so it's cumulative and it takes a while to build up. So anybody that's thinking of getting into landscape photography for a living, you might want to think twice about it. To be honest with you, you have to really love it and love the lifestyle to really embrace it. Because it's, at the end of the day, it has absolutely nothing to do with photography. It's all about personality these days and trying to sell yourself, which is something that I have never been very good at. And that's why I sold the rights to images to magazines, because I didn't have to. A lot of the times it was through the mail, and now it's just over the internet. But those sales are pretty much dried up because there's a lot of photographers out there, amateurs, a lot of amateurs giving their images away for pretty much nothing, and it's really hurt the photography industry. And I'm not bitter about it, it's just the way it is, and you just have to find ways to make it work. Personally, I don't know an awful lot of nature landscape photographers that make a living out of photography. Most of the people that I know have made their bucket load of money doing something else, and now they've become a photographer, or they have a spouse that has a good job, or they're living off their savings, or they live eating macaroni and cheese. It's a dream. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the answers from these questions. Sorry if I didn't answer all of them. Thanks ever so much for watching this video, and please be sure to give me a thumbs up if you did enjoy this video. All right, hopefully next week I'll have something a little bit more enjoyable to watch with some photography. All right, till next time, bye for now.